Okay, so let's start again. I was just welcoming everyone to our annual conference, our participants and speakers. And I was saying I will just take 2 minutes of your time and then leave the floor to our speakers. Very briefly, for those who are not really familiar with the Responsible Mica Initiative, it's an organization which was created in 2017 with an objective to co-design and co-implement approaches towards fair, responsible and sustainable mica supply chains free of child labor. As for now, we are working in India and in Madagascar. And we are really happy to have you for this annual conference. These are moments which are important and nice for us for 2 main reasons. First, RMI is its members, for sure, but RMI is also a multi-stakeholder organization and is backed by all its partners, allies, and today is the perfect opportunity to recognize them all. And why not an opportunity also to create new ideas, partnerships, and membership. And second, annual conferences or events are the opportunity to take the time to look back over the past year and celebrate progress, but also identify blocking points and next areas for work. And both are critical to maintain also the dynamism of organizations like ours. So with this, today, the annual conference will be introduced and closed by our president, Carsten Müller. And we are incredibly lucky also to have as keynote speaker and also who agreed to facilitate the entire conference, Louis Maréchal. I don't know if I need to introduce him, but Louis is Senior Advisor Minerals and Extractives at the OECD. And we have as speakers and panelists, Nicolas Eslava from AFI Consulting, Alice Gissinger from Le Basic, Karine Danielson from BioWay, Juan Perez from the Alliance for Responsible Mining, and Olivier Dubourdieu from the Responsible Mica Initiative team. So maybe just a short note, you are all familiar with team meetings. You know that you can use the chat to raise your questions. We'll spare some time at the end of the conference to answer them. If we do not have the time, we will answer them afterwards. Be sure about that. And with this, Carsten, then Louis, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Fanny. My name is Carsten Müller, and I want to address all participants and welcome them on behalf of the RMI executive team, with all the team members located in France, in India, and Madagascar. But I also want to welcome you on behalf of my fellow board members and the entire membership of RMI. For us, it's a great opportunity to showcase our activities here in such an annual conference. And it is also for us one of the perfect opportunities to highlight some of the activities. And for this time, we have selected to focus on Madagascar activities, which are the most recent ones. And I hope that this really strikes your interest. Our entire RMI organization has grown also due to the fact that the activities have been extended from Madagascar to Madagascar out of the former activities in India. And I'm very delighted now to open this session. It is important to know that the activities that have been started in Madagascar are based on everything the RMI has learned during all those Indian activities over the last 6 to 7 years. So it's really based on builds on the experiences that have been gained there. And besides this, today's presentation on Madagascar, it is for me a pleasure to also announce that today will be the publication of the RMI annual report for the year 2023. And this conference is also the opportunity to introduce this report or to advertise this report and offer it to you for your consideration and reading. So with all of that, I want to hand over the floor to our speakers. We will convene again then, and we'll be able to have some conclusions at the end of this meeting. So please enjoy and ask questions, follow closely the presentation and the discussions that our valued speakers and presenters now will have on the activities of the RMI in Madagascar. So have fun, and I'm happy to have a very lively discussion at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, Fanny, and thanks for the invitation to the OECD to open this conference and moderate the conversation. Just so as a reminder, I've been with the OECD for close to 10 years now, working on the implementation of the OECD due diligence standard for responsible supply chain of minerals, focusing on conflict-affected and high-risk areas. We started off about 15 years ago working on the context of the Great Lakes regions in Africa. And I'm sure you've heard the recent news. This topic is pretty much still one of the major issues in the area, but our standard has always been applicable to all geographies and all supply chain of mineral resources, which explains why I'm really happy to be here today to talk about mica. I mean, we've been working together with the RMI since pretty much the beginning of the initiative with Fanny and Olivier and the rest of the team. And we are very happy at the OECD to be able to provide a space for supply chain of mineral resources that are not necessarily the most media prone. We consider that they're are equally important, and that was even before the hype around electric vehicles and batteries. Interestingly, and I actually learned this with the RMI, mica is increasingly used in electrical vehicle batteries, which is really something that I don't know if many people know that beyond this little group. But it actually supports the overall message that we have at the OECD Secretariat. It's not possible to neglect any supply chain of minerals for two reasons. Because you have risks in all of them, and we had produced several years ago a report called Risk Trends. I think that was right before COVID, highlighting allegations of risks of conflict financing, serious abuse of human rights, serious economic crimes in about 40 different supply chain of mineral resources. And it didn't come up as a surprise that we found allegations of those risks in all supply chains, including mica, I think back in the days. But obviously that conversation is increasingly important as the awareness around the planned increase in mining activities is becoming clearer to a large number of companies, a large number of stakeholders, policymakers, et cetera. So we're in an interesting moment in time now where people actually now start to understand why due diligence truly matters and why taking a comprehensive approach to due diligence is the only way to go, because these are fluid situations. Risks might progressively disappear in a supply chain or in a producing area, but they will pop up somewhere else. So what companies need to have in place are systems that are going to help them to adapt to this evolving situations, to adapt to the new minerals that they may be after. And that's very clear when you look at the automotive industry. Several years ago, they were not really that much interested in the so-called battery minerals for good reasons. But then now they have to, in particular because of increasing regulations. So for those companies that have those management systems in place, it's not necessarily an extra burden to be able to look into additional supply chain of minerals. For the laggards, those that have been reluctant to develop those management systems, the learning curve is much steeper now, and in particular because of the regulation. There's another element that I really like, of course, in the Responsible Mica Initiative is the focus on artisanal and small-scale mining, which has always been a key topic for the OECD implementation program for a number of reasons. So again, really delighted to be able to support as much as we can, provide visibility and be in accompanying the efforts of the initiative. I think I don't need to take much more time than that. We have a very strong panel lined up today. And thanks to Olivier and the other panelists for helping me to prep that session. And I think I'll get started very quickly. Just wanted to flag that this will be more of an open discussion, open conversation with a lot of back and forth between the various presenters. And as was said, we'll set time at the end of this lively discussion to take as many questions as we can. So first of all, just to set the scene a bit, I'd like to turn to Olivier, just to ask if you can provide a bit of context, what we're talking about. What does ASM in Mica in Madagascar look like?
Sure, and thanks a lot, Louis, for being here with us today. Thanks, Fanny, Carsten, for the introduction. Indeed, I really liked what you said about the media attention that Mica doesn't bring to itself. Usually nobody knows about Mica. Well, it's a very versatile material. It's used in an endless number of applications, starting of course with cosmetic and paints as a basis for pigments, but in insulation application, in the building industry, in the oil and gas industry, in the plastic industry, in a really long list of applications. And what could be interesting to know for those of you who don't know that yet, but there are multiple sorts of mica, and two of them are the most important one, phlogopite and muscovite. And in Madagascar, coming to Madagascar, mainly phlogopite is produced, which is called brown, which is the so-called brown mica, and which is used in the insulation applications mainly due to its physical and chemical properties. And so it's used and mainly used in, as you said, Louis, in EV batteries and battery pack as an insulation material to protect batteries against fire, against thermal expansions, etc., etc. And in Madagascar, as in India, where the Responsible Mica Initiative has been present for now 7 years, mica is produced in artisanal and small-scale mining. And not all artisanal and small-scale mining are presenting issues, but some of them do. And the ones where mica is produced in the south of Madagascar are unfortunately full of issues, are high-risk ones, if we can call them as such. And the situation over there is quite harsh. People are living in what we can call extreme poverty situation. They are working in poor conditions, and there are a lot of issues related to gender equality or inequalities, to child labor, to working in and living in decent conditions. In terms of supply chain structure, really rapidly, but comparable to what we can see in India as well, where you've got the mines who are producing mica, selling it to a few collectors who are selling this mica to aggregators and then to exporters and processors. And these few first steps of the supply chains are really the ones where main issues are encountered, and with which at least RMI tries to act in order to improve the working and living conditions of the people.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas. I'd like to turn to you now for two reasons. One, because you've been in this field for a number of years, and as I understand, you've just produced a stakeholder mapping, and I'd like to come back to you on in general the context in Madagascar, but also specifically asking about what to you are the main root causes for the state of poverty that Olivier was alluding to.
Yes. Hi, Louis. Hi, Olivier. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm trying at the moment, by the way, to share some screen. I'm not sure whether you can see it or not. But
We have a
it's
white screen for
not.
the moment.
Oh, white screen. No, this is.
I
can see
can share
myself
it.
here, but it's.
I can share it for you.
Yeah, if you could, maybe that would be the easiest one. Okay, stop sharing. There we go. Yeah, I mean, this entire thing of having the presentation is just because there's one slide I think that will help us really. Well, here, starting with an image of Phlogopite, as Louis mentioned, and Olivier as well. Yeah, so what have we done for the work that we have done for RMI? Took place last year at the beginning of 2023, and the idea was to do a stakeholder mapping. So not only to understand what were the different were the different stakeholders that were present in the mica supply chains of the island, but also to know in a more mapping sense geographically, where does mica mining take places, where are the specific areas, where are the specific sites, as well as understand a little bit the relationship between the different actors, their openness to change and to modifications into the supply chain. And so therefore, we're going to go over this in this presentation and the main insight that we've had from the stakeholder mapping. Olivier, if we can, next one. Yeah, I mean, this is not to make a sales pitch, but for those that are interested in us, I'm just leaving this so this is in the record, and you can see that we've been doing a bit of work in multiple supply chains. So this is an environment, quite a bit of work for a variety of clients, including this way now on mica. And so if we could go to the slide. And I don't want to spend much time on methodology because I think that this is the thing that people are not necessarily the keenest to hear about. But I think here are a few points that I want to put forward as they are important for anyone that works in the sector here, is that we may have a project that was very structured, you know, a desk-based work first, collecting data, reviews, and snowballing from there, you identifying geo information layers that we could use in the fieldwork to further target the people, and then being able to go in the people and do the interviews face to face to complement the data that we had. All of this is very good, but reality strikes you sometimes. And in Madagascar, for example, while we thought that we had planned our fieldwork for after the cyclone season, we still had to deal with the tail of Cyclone Freddy that actually disrupted a lot of the road network. We also had to deal with quite a few issues of lack of data at different levels. And we could only access really the data through the people that we had with us, our Malagasy team. So I think what I want to put out for here is that it's very key in contexts like Madagascar to have the right team in the field, to have the right team that can do the work, the solid work that it takes sometimes to liaise with the people, to do manual data extraction in database that are not necessarily fully computer accessible, and that once that this data is present, that now RMI has this information, it's important that the different people in the sector know who has what in order not to duplicate efforts and to lose data that has already been generated. So I think this is a very important element that I'd like to put forward is you need good teams, good work has been done. And so do query RMI when you have specific needs relating to Madagascar and the mica sector there, because they do have a solid base of information. But now I think moving on to the next slide, and I think what is the biggest finding for us from a supply chain perspective here in Madagascar here was the fact that a lot of the work that we are seeing being done in this sector broadly focuses really on the south of the island that you can see on the map here in the lighter pink, which is this area that is over the regions of Andrui and Anus, which is always seen as the traditional mica extracting area. However, our work has shown that there are tunnels spread out across the country and mica operations all the way from Atimandrefan to Macharamboni, Vakinakach, and the like. So you really have a sector that is much less geographically concentrated in its offer theme, and they're networks that are relatively independent because of the state of the road infrastructure needed for moving mica around in the country, you don't have so many, such a buffer zone between the two areas, with the exception of Betruk, which is a municipality that sort of supplies the two different clusters and their export points that are different. So we do have two different areas, and we have seen in our work that so far, really the big focus of most interventions and data collection has been this southern sector that exports through the harbor of Tolagnaro, or Fort-de-France, if you prefer in French, and that the rest of the area, the rest of the country, this area that we have here in a deeper shade of pink, has exports that Toliara, mostly through the harbor of Tuamasin. This area hasn't been intervened so much. So therefore, there are new areas where mica is taking place. And we've also seen over the years that there's been a bit of a shift and ebb and flow between the different ports of export, with Tolagnaro being extremely strong in 2020, for example, in terms of export, more than 70% of the exports, but somehow in 2022, comprise about 20% of the exports. And even though there is trade, or rather reshipment going from harbor to harbor, we nevertheless do see some shifts that are based on a number of factors, and that really paint a much more complex image of the mica sector in Madagascar. That's what is seen. However, the conditions that we've been able to document on this fieldwork really are similar across the island, maybe towards with less urgency more in the north, because the south really has its own very specific socio-environmental context that it presents much more vulnerabilities for populations. But nevertheless, we have a sector that needs to get better in addressing the social harms and the aspiration of the communities working in there. Next slide, please. And I think an interest, we jumped over one slide there. Oh, there we go. I think another interesting element that we saw with those two different mica clusters, as we chose to call them, is that you had different actors that were associated with them. Not different roles in the supply chain. The roles are always the same. You do have your miners, you do have your intermediary traders, you have consolidation, you have sorting, you have and you have facilitators in there, but rather the people that are linked to these operations are different. And there's, as we've seen, a high interdependence between business here and political leadership. And here, maybe I have to stress that this is data that we've collected at the beginning of 2023. 1 year has passed since. There've been multiple shakeups in different ministries across the island, and there's been new elections. So our data on this one may be, our understanding may be 1 year, 1 year late, 1 year behind the curve. But nevertheless, it is important to stress that this link exists, and is a link that needs to be acknowledged when you are doing work in the sector, as this impacts everything from the actors that are present to the port of export that is being chosen for the export of mica. The other element I think that is important to take into account when we're looking at the sector like this is the capacity of counterparts. What has in this work is that national level ministries are focused on the coordination of the activities of the regional ministries, as well as international organizations, CSOs, NGOs, and different development agencies. The state agencies really responsible for the implementation per se tend to be, or rather are, the regional directorates or representations that are present in the region. And those, unfortunately, have issues regarding lack of capacity, both direct and indirect. What do you mean by direct lack of capacity? Where, simply put, there's rarely enough people for the size of the territories and the number of sites that they should have to monitor. But at the same time also, logistical capacities might also be falling quite short. In certain cases, Those agents don't have a car or don't have a motorbike to actually go to the areas where they need to go. And in other cases where the car is there, there's no funds for them to have gasoline. So they don't have a capacity to go and visit the different sites. That means that a lot of the attention of the authorities has not focused so much so far on the mines, but more on the sorting centers that are more located in urban areas, closer to the areas of operation, and that are more accessible to the authorities. So there's a lack of direct capacity in this regard. But then comes also the topic of what I would like to call indirect capacity, which is the entire supporting capacity that is in and around the ministries or the state agency that are concerned. For example, if you find a child working in a sorting center in the city where you are, it is good. I mean, it's not good that the child is there. It's good that there's been an intervention, that you've identified that the child is there. But what do you do with this child when you do not have a support network, when there is not a school that can actually take this child and keep them in school, bringing them some food? What do you do when orphans are working in certain sorting centers and have to support their even younger brothers and sisters? But there's no orphanage where those children can turn to. Is it legitimate to take out a child out of these bad conditions to perhaps put them in a further condition of vulnerability because they don't have access to this work? This is the questions that we're seeing, and this is the lack of capacity that we've been seeing in the regions, in the urban areas, and perhaps even more markedly in the sites, so in the rural areas, in the mining sites themselves. But while this may sound relatively harsh, negative, I think there's a very keen point that we have to put forward, and that was touched upon by Olivier. If we can go to the next slide. And this point really is that Madagascar is going through a particularly problematic, stressing time environmentally at the time. There's been droughts for many years. And as a result, and especially in the south of the country, a lot of people have gone through hunger pangs. And what I'm saying now is not an exaggeration, that I have had people telling us in this fieldwork from Mica, although we also had the same discussion with sapphires or gemstones, of people telling us, if it weren't for mining, we would have starved, as in literally. They did not have access to the traditional agricultural livelihoods because of the kere, the droughts that were hitting the south of the island, and therefore had to find other activities. And as seemingly bad from an external point of view mining is, it nevertheless allowed them to have enough food to go by. And that means for us, I think very clearly that while the situation may be harsh, look bad, disengagement of the industry is not an option, because the only thing this will do will be to further put into further conditions of vulnerability people that are already about the most vulnerable in Madagascar, and therefore engagement is necessary. And it will take a long time to have continuous improvement of the conditions and to slowly shift the different things. And maybe a tiny last point here, I think that I had my presentation, I think bounces nicely on what Louis said, that he learned a lot about mica. I think the miners that we with whom we talked actually did on their own also learn about mica, because a lot of them told us, we have no idea what this material is being used. And it was very interesting for them to actually know that it was in the paint of the car that we had, that you had it in batteries. And I mean, this issue here, the issue for the people is their livelihood, but you could also see a little bit of pride when they saw that their work was contributing to all of those different things. And that was, I think, a bit of a nice touch for us to be able to, at the moment, bring this little bit of information to them. And at the same time, bringing this information from the field to RMI. So I think overall that would be the presentation. I don't know if you have a specific follow-up question, Louis, now, or Olivier, or if you want to go to the next presenter.
No, it's actually an interesting segue into the direction that I would like to take the conversation to. I mean, from poverty comes an obvious question. Why are those miners still in that state of poverty? One obvious answer could be the issue of the price that they're getting. and I understand it's not really high. So Olivier, I wanted to ask you if you can comment on that.
Yeah, maybe, and thanks, Nicolas, for presenting your valuable work for us at the Responsible Mica Initiative. I think that there are two families of reasons behind the low price of mica at local level, at mine level, really. What we see, and we did a baseline in a few mine sites in Madagascar, what we see is that we have 70% of the people who don't know how to read nor write, and 80, even almost 90% amongst the youth who don't know nor read or write. And this has an obvious consequence in terms of the bargaining power miners have when discussing the price with collectors at really local level. So that would be a first reason. Second reason at local level, and I guess Nicolas could maybe deep dive into this afterwards, there is the establishment of monopsonies by a few actors who are taking control of a mine site and are indirectly or directly controlling the price of mica that is paid here. And a third reason at local level is the unstable frequency at which collectors are passing from a mine site to another and coming back to the same mine site. And at national and international level, there is an obvious pressure from the other actors of the value chain to, I mean, obviously and logically, have the best quality for the lowest price possible. Not necessarily taking into account that implementing responsible workplace practices has a cost, and definitely putting pressure on Madagascar and Indian actors, of course, to lower the price for the same quality. And then the final reason at national level, which is a historical one, and which is the involvement of the mining ministry, who tried to solve the issue by setting up a minimum price for mica, a minimum export price, and which has decreased this minimum export price to remain competitive on an international market. And these had, of course, consequences for the price being paid at export from Madagascar.
Thanks a lot. So based on what you're saying, how do you manage that, and how do you manage to increase the price then?
That's a very good question, and I think the first step was to demonstrate with the help of Le Basique, a French Paris-based consulting or accompaniment firm, to demonstrate that paying a fair price, at least a fair price for mica at mine level, a fair price that would support the payment of a living income is possible. And I'm saying that in the mica supply chain, it's a very specific case in India and Madagascar. We demonstrated, and I think Alice could deep dive into that. But that paying at least a fair price for mica supporting a living income is possible.
You can turn to my presentation, the title page.
Yeah, title.
Yeah, page. Thank you. So yeah, thank you very much, Olivier. I'm going to talk a little bit about what would be the consequences of implementing a living income for mica workers in Madagascar and accessorily in India, where we also did our study. I need to put in the presentation. Okay, fine. So before I begin, first of all, I want to thank the people at RMI who made this study possible. That would be Olivier, Fanny, Marine, Franconi, Vijay, and Gautam, without whom the data collection for this project would not have been possible. And I'm going to answer your question about the impact of a living income down the chain. But before I do that, I think I need to introduce the model that Basic built to really see what we're talking about. So if you go to slide 3. Just before that. Here we are. So Basic was commissioned by the RMI to build a model of the mica value chain all the way from the mine to its final utilization in a number of products. So we focused, you can see in gray, on 3 types of end products in which we established Mica's role. First, paints and coatings, second, cosmetics, and third, automotive. And the idea was to build an interactive model that would enable users to see how value distribution happens along the chain. And to do that, though, we first had to segment. Yeah, sure, we go to number 5. First, we had to make a theoretical model. Of course, this is all theoretical. So we had to simplify reality. And we did it by creating 5 steps in the mica value chain. The first is the one of mica picking, which takes place at the mine. The second was primary sorting and processing, which is, for example, turning mica into flakes or powder or mica filler. This is mainly something that happens in India and Madagascar. There's very little processing that happens. Third, we get to the middle of the chain where mica is ground, pressed, or pigments are manufactured. And this yellow category we'll see in a minute is one where considerable value is accrued. Then we have the finished product manufacturing. This is where the final touches are put, where packaging is applied, where it applies. And finally, we have retail. So if you note these colors, red, mica picking, orange, sorting and processing, third, intermediate product manufacturing, fourth, finished product manufacturing, and 5, retail. I can go to slide 6, the next one. And so when you look at I could show you in a browser what this looks like, but this is a screenshot from our model. And what you see is there are 2 different kinds of objects. There are ellipses, which are highlighted at the left, and those represent operations. So that is, for example, mica picking or mica grinding or transformation of mica into micropigments. And then you have, after each ellipse, you have a rectangle, and those represent intermediate products. So that is what happens for example, as a product of the operation of mica grinding, you have ground mica. As a product of the operation of mica pressing, you have detailed mica laminates. And next slide. What we then did was we applied a number of scenarios, 3 in India and 1 in Madagascar. I can tell you why those numbers, but I won't delve into it right now. We built scenarios that enable the user to see how increases upstream of the chain at the mine level translates into higher price down the chain. So this is an example of a screenshot where you would see at left of the segment, left of the rectangle, the initial value for the product, and then in blue you have a little arrow that tells you how much the increase in mica cost at the mine level has added to that product. Now, if we could go to slide 11, please. So the question is, what happens when you start to pay a living income? Well, the obvious answer is prices increase, and they increase everywhere. So this is a diagram of the price of mica from, well, it's not the same, it's not the right, anyway. The price of mica from the mine at the left through the mining group and the mining group scenario. And in the third, you have the collection and sorting point, and then FOB at the end. What you'll notice is, unfortunately, there's been a bug in the slides, but the main thing to notice is that living income in Madagascar entails increasing a price by 6 from the initial price to the mining group scenario price. And at the end, you reach an increase in FOB that's quite significant. It more or less doubles from the status quo, which is in blue, and the mining group scenario, which is in orange. I guess I didn't really explain the mining group scenario, did I? Basically, the idea of the mining group scenario is that miners organize into groups of 50 to 300 or so. They acquire formal permits for mining on site. They purchase personal protective equipment and tools for mining, which are paid for by the mining group. All workers make a living income. So you're seeing that on the orange part of the graph, that's the living income, approximately 140 USD per month. And then the tax and administrative context also changes in this scenario. Informal facilitation fees on the transport chain disappear, and this actually lowers the overall taxes paid by exporters. That's how many facilitation fees there are. In this scenario, documents are produced legally, so some of the costs for fake permits disappear. Living income also means that exporters now pay employee tax at a height of 15% of their margins, which they didn't before, in addition to the corporate income tax, which they pay. So that is, sorry, I should have stated earlier, that is the mining group scenario for which you see the different prices of mica at the different stages of the chain. In orange, living income mining groups, in blue, the status quo. If we can go to the next slide. There's a bug in the presentation. Do you mind if I sit where you are?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I want to show you this slide. Okay, I think I can put it. No? Okay, fine. So this is a table that summarizes, comparing Madagascar and India, the impact of living income scenarios in both countries. In India, also, the scenario includes the formation of cooperatives. There's other scenarios that we studied in India, but I'm not representing them here because, first, for simplification, and two, because cooperatives appear to be the direction in which the Indian context is going, if I understood my RMI correctly. So I wanted just to point out a couple of things here. The first is that mining in Madagascar produces mica at a much lower price than it does in India. If you look at the first line, the price at the mine is 140 per ton in Madagascar. It's 470 per ton on average in India. And this difference between the prices between the two countries ricochets all the way down the chain, whereby the increase in price from that's due to mica coming from Madagascar is always less than the increase in price and percentage of mica that comes from India. This is what you can see in yellow, for example, in the case of an electric car, where we have mica in the form of electric vehicle batteries and droning insulation. Mica from Madagascar adds only 24 USD per car, US cents, excuse me. So to pay a living wage to a miner in Madagascar, living wage is about 580,000 RERE per month. You end up paying 24 cents more on your car. That's, of course, excluding electronic components, but it includes original OEM paint, it includes electric vehicle batteries, and it includes droning insulation. So that's actually the point is it's very, very small increase. And even in India, where the mica, as I said, is considerably more expensive, and where the pigments factor in, they don't in Madagascar because focal-pipe mica is not used to make pigments. In India, you have an increase of just $3.5 for a car that costs something like upwards of 30,000 euros. And the same happens in the case of the other yellow line, DIY anti-corrosion paint. This line is meant to illustrate the difference between products that are very expensive and products that are very cheap, which is to say that the price increase of paying a living income in each product is much greater for a product that costs less, because the mica is it constitutes a greater percentage of the price of that item. This is why the electric car, the value out of the price add is in the range of less than 0.01% for DIY anti-corrosion paint, but it's slightly higher. For the electric car, but it's slightly higher for DIY anti-corrosion paint. So the takeaway is this: it costs very little in the long stream of things to pay mica pickers a living income, and the models that we did include not just a living income for mica pickers, but it also included living wage for all actors along the chain. And so, if I can show one last thing, or am I running over time? I'll just show you now distributions of value that we compiled for the different types of the different scenarios. in the current situation in Madagascar, the mine gate price is 0.02 USD, and mining group scenario, it increases almost 7 times, like I said earlier. In terms of the cost to mining groups don't exist in the current situation, but if they would, the mica scrap would constitute about 96% of their costs. Now, what's interesting is now if you turn to collectors, which are the next rung in the ladder, in the current situation, the mica scrap, which is the upper diagram, in the current situation, only about 30% of the value add at this stage is mica scrap. There's also a whole bunch of facilitation fees that we see on the left. Product, I won't list them all, but there's about 7. And in a scenario where the mica sector in Madagascar is not formalized, but let's say in which the law is applied, the facilitation fees disappear, and the mica scrap price from the mine increases, and as a result, the value add at this stage is mainly from mica, and much less so for collectors. And it's the same thing for exporters. This is the current situation, and this is the situation with a living income and mica mining groups.
Thanks. So that was very compelling. Coming back to you, Olivier, I mean, we've just heard about the potential impact of paying a living income. Is this the only way forward? Is this the only thing that you would recommend? And is it also the absolutely only solution available to increase the livelihoods of the miners?
Well, obviously not the only thing. One of the main things for sure. And now that we have demonstrated with the help of the BASIC that it was possible, the whole idea will be to implement such solutions. And we know that paying at least a fair price for mica supporting a living income upstream of the value chain will take time. And in the meantime, we need to address poor working conditions in mines and in processing units. And that's why we partnered with the Alliance with Responsible Mining, who is represented today by Juan, to develop an adaptation. I'm sure he will talk about it better than myself, but an adaptation of the craft code to the mica value chain. Yeah, Juan, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, everyone, for letting me be taking part of this rich conversation. Of course, and I wanted to reflect on what Alice was saying, the demonstration of how this price can be increased was really compelling. And I think in ARM and with our work with the Responsible Mica Initiative, we can provide a tool to increase those prices through the improvement of practices at the mining sites. So we at ARM, we are a standard setting organization, and we truly believe that we can add value to ASM supply chain actors in aligning practices and accompanying them through positive transformation pathways. And it is in that sense that we co-develop with the Responsible Mica Initiative a standard for artisanal mica miners as a branch, as Olivier said, or annex of craft code. So craft code, for people who may not know, stands for Code of Risk Mitigation for ASM engaging in formal trade. And to put it simply, it is a simplified guidance to empower artisanal miners in progressive compliance of market requirements and to facilitate due diligence in ASM. So the overall intent of this code is to promote the sustainable social, environmental, and economic development of ASM sector, and leveraging demonstrable conformance with due diligence requirements. So it is an instrument then that can generate a positive development. And I would say to reflect on what was said before, to reflect a fair wage or price to mica producers, artisanal producers. So the craft and this very tool, the mica craft or the mica adaptation, expected to be a tool principally for the miners to empower them in understanding and complying with market expectations and due diligence needs. But not only to upstream players, the craft is also expected to be key for downstream actors to enable them trade with ASM and to really engage commercially with artisanal small-scale mica miners. The craft is closely aligned with the OECD due diligence guidance on minerals, and to put it simply, it contains mineral agnostic modules to rate or to categorize different levels of risks, as well as annexes or branches. So with the Responsible Mica Initiative, we are developing a branch specific for artisanal mica producers. What the principles that or how we did this work together, we kept in mind to really align with the global craft recognition process and its market access, and we introduce a progressivity element or intermediate lower requirements, and also the possibility of granting a grace period to comply with minimum acceptable criteria by artisanal miners. And this is really key. It was really key for us to maintain this progressivity, because we have seen it today with the presentation made by Olivier and Nicolas, the lower development of ASM of Mica ASM in Madagascar requires and compels us to do a more progressive way to adapt to due diligence framework in a soft way. So why the craft code and why this tool can be a tool for increased prices and to improve practices at the mining site. So we decided to further explore the possibilities offered by craft in terms of adaptation, and we see an opportunity in its open source Creative Commons license, because it can be used by any actor, as it is a free tool to use and to adapt to specificities of the context, both mineral and geographic context. And furthermore, we wanted to align this process of creating a new standard with an ongoing process of updating the craft code, which was passing a OECD alignment assessment. So we were sure to be fully aligned in both the core version of the standard and the mica branch to the due diligence guidance provided by the OECD. So there is another reason to use craft as a tool to improve the practices and to improve the wages received by the miners, and it is to take the craft not only as a standard, but as a roadmap or tool to sustainability and to market access. So we at ARM, we have been developing a training center, and we conducted a mission with the Responsible Mica Initiative team in Madagascar to take the craft really as a roadmap with different stages and cover different risk or categories and improve the practices on the mining site. So we covered issues like the organizational structure, the governance models at the mining sites, and how to mitigate Annex 2 related risks by the OECD and other high risk for the mining producers. So this is a way in which we could improve the capacity or install the capacity in the Responsible Mica Initiative team to conduct further projects on the field and empower miners in their access to fair prices and formal markets.
Thank you, Juan. Just before going to the next question, we're already an hour into the conversation. If we want to keep a bit of time for Q&A, we'll need to make the interventions a bit shorter. So I would kindly ask the panelists to be a bit more straightforward. Having said that, Olivier, the craft code that the OECD is very familiar with covers the mining step. But what about the sorting sites then?
Yeah, very good question. Very quick question answer. With the Responsible Minerals Initiative, we partnered a few years ago to develop the global workplace standards for mica processing units, and which basically is an ESG and OHS classical standard. Mm-hmm. We started its implementation in India, and we have a few promising results with external audits being set up in India and showcasing first really concrete results. Mm-hmm. And in Madagascar, we plan to do exactly the same to support mica exporters, mica sorters in the implementation of these global workplace standards for mica processing units. Mm-hmm. We are hiring right now somebody to handle this, and as well as expanding the team. But definitely something on our to do for the next few months.
And how do you make sure that those international standards align with local legal requirements?
But that's a key question, because when you have international standards, sometimes the law is more clear and more accurate than the standard itself, and that's why we asked BioWay's team, and Karin is here to speak a little bit about this, to compare our global standards, be the mica craft or the global workplace standards for mica processing units, with the local regulation, and to just share with us some recommendations of what they saw, what they could witness on the ground, both in mining sites and in processing sites, sorting sites. Mm. So yeah, Karin, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share the results of our work with RMI. So as Olivier said, the main work done by BioWay's team is legal analysis and comparison of local legal and institutional framework to the requirements of international standard and the craft code. For the international standard, the analysis was carried out in 3 levels. So the OHS, the working condition, and the environmental criteria. And for each level of criteria, we found that the local legal framework is more precise, more explicit in terms of requirements, corresponding to between 66 and 69% of requirements. Just to summarize and to explain more, for the OHS and working conditions, for the requirements that are not made explicit, it's important to point out the majority of these texts, the texts currently applicable are no longer in line with the evolution of technological tools and also the equipment that can be mobilized to facilitate certain processes of communication, monitoring, digitization, control, and management. But it must be noted that the prospects for the evolution of Malagasy labor code and actually the Malagasy mining code both currently being validated, which will certainly allow the integration of more specifics and pragmatic requirements according to these two standards. So the environmental part, the requirements that are not explicitly stated relate specifically to requirements relating to waste management, for example, the energy and water management on the sites. So it could be about storage or about transport practices. For the craft code, sets out the majority of the requirements necessary for a more respectful of human rights and sustainability exploitation. The alignment of requirements with the current mining code is quite low. However, the analysis of the draft law shows the evolution of perspective since several themes are considered in more serious way, like child labor, gender equality, etc. It's necessary to, according to all the analysis done, it's necessary to ensure that local stakeholders understand the interests and issues. The local community must to be sensitized, involved, and supported in the implementation of this requirement and in the fight against the bad current habits. It will also ensure adherence to the value and the principle covered before working on implementation. For about the recommendations, let's say we have 3 points to share with you. The first point is that we can go for implementation of about these 2 standards. We don't have to wait the local legal framework to be totally aligned with all the requirements. I mean, as there is no contradiction and no ever prohibited recruitment, so we can begin the implementation in the different steps and with different stakeholders for the implementation of all requirements to have a more sustainability exploitation. The second point is there is a need of co-construction practices with all the stakeholders, particularly with exploitation operators on what they real issues and what is specifically feasible on what time. Dialogue must be at the heart of all interactions to ensure the understanding and buy-in of all stakeholders. It's necessary for all of them to understand how this development can positively impact their production performance, their work, and all type of performance. And also, thank you for RMI for their for their work now with all stakeholders. I know it's not very easy according all local issues. And the last point is it will be then also interesting to share concrete case studies from India, for example, or elsewhere that will demonstrate the interest of using the recommended practice of the standards, and also conduct initial awareness session, for example, on the expected good practice. So that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's the last brick that we needed to start the conversation about the next steps. Olivier, now we have two well-articulated standards for mine sites and sorting sites, a good understanding of local regulation. We have the RMI that's now in place, and this report on the consequences and impact of living wages. So how do you intend to bring that forward now?
Yeah, and thanks a lot for sharing your recommendations, all of you partners of the Responsible Mica Initiative. We duly take them into account, and the idea now is to move forward into the concrete implementation of all actions that will aim to implement responsible workplace practices and at the end of the day, decent living conditions for mica miners and mica sorters. And I think it will start answering Barry's question that was asked in the chat. But maybe first, child labor is a complex issue, and if we are only taking that as a perspective, it will take time to tackle child labor in mines, definitely. It will take time, and we know that at the Responsible Mica Initiative. We know that it will require a higher price, at least a fair price for to support a decent living wage. It will require the implementation of the Mica craft, the implementation of the global workplace standards in sorting sites, and for that we plan to follow, and I think it's aligned with the last recommendation from Karine. We plan to follow the logic we had in India, and we have had in India, to target and to address all three main groups of stakeholders. The first one being the private sector actors with miners and sorters and exporters. Here, the objective is to support them on the ground with the implementation of responsible workplace practices that are defined in the Mica Craft and the global workplace standards. And for that, we have a team on the ground, which I believe gives the Responsible Mica Initiative a lot of value. And with this team, we will accompany on site the implementation of responsible workplace practices. That's not sufficient. We need to embark as well the rest of the actors of the value chain in order to support financially the implementation of responsible workplace practices upstream. And for that, we have the support of all our members, which are almost 100 now. And we shall not forget that it's a question of shared responsibility at the end of the day. So we need the support of downstream actors as well, in order to support the implementation of responsible workplace practices upstream. So that would be for the first one. The second one is to support mica miners and their communities in not only the mining activity itself, but as well in the other aspects of their lives. So to implement what we call at RMI community empowerment programs, and for which we are in the process of selecting our partners on the ground to implement these community empowerment programs. These community empowerment programs, they have the benefit of bridging the timing gaps, because we know implementing a living income will take time. But in between, of course, we cannot scale up to hundreds, thousands of villages, but we can implement in a few villages, in a few mining sites, community empowerment programs that will support access to drinkable water in Madagascar, access to quality education, access to nutrition, and access to healthcare. And finally, and I think it was said as well during the presentation, and especially as well with you, Alice, the idea of embarking state governments, and it was said as well by Nicolas, embarking state government, state representatives, and especially regional representatives in the movement is something that is key to be sure that once RMI would have disappeared because all issues will be solved, the supply chain on one hand and the government representatives on the other hand, and the mining communities as well, are together working into maintaining these virtuous working conditions and living conditions for the miners.
Thanks a lot. I'd like now to open the floor for questions. We have about, I'd say, 10 to 15 minutes. I do have a couple of questions myself, but really wanted to see if we have any raised hands or questions in the chat. I think, Olivier, you have access to the chat. I don't.
Yeah.
So let's see if people want to speak openly, and I would encourage you to do that by raising your hands, or you can ask the questions in the chat, but it's a bit more difficult for us to process. So don't be shy, and please open up your mics.
And maybe waiting for people to open their mics and think about questions. I'll take Barry's Ferguson's question. Sure. So Barry's questions, for those of you who don't have access to the chat, Barry's question is first on the level of financial support, global support that Mica communities and Mica workers in certain sites need in order to improve their living conditions in general. And Barry's question is very clear about it and says that the support from RMI and from all the organizations that are here in Madagascar are at least 2 orders of magnitude lower than what is needed for an effective change on the ground. I would say, if you are taking only RMI and only the other ones, other organizations like Terre des Hommes, for example, who are implementing programs in Mica mining sites, indeed, the level of financial support is far lower than what is needed. But I think the strength of the Responsible Mica Initiative is to have the backup from all actors of the value chain. And the whole idea that if we are doing it alone as an NGO, we won't achieve anything. And we will be able to have an effective change on the ground if we have the support from downstream actors of the value chain. And we see that in terms of implementing a living income, we see the huge interest of downstream actors from component manufacturers to brands to support this movement. So I would say that the scale up of our programs will come from the support from downstream actors.
Quick follow-up question on the extent to which RMI and perhaps also Nicolas, you can chime in with. You have been able to identify potential synergies with other in-country projects looking at similar issues around ASM. I figured there's quite a lot. So is there room for the development of synergies and cooperations in country?
Yes, there is room. But really, I think that there's Madagascar, if you look at it in the end, in terms of implementation capacity, the footprint that is available for the implementation of projects is often relatively limited. You have a few experts that are very good at their job. Some of them are working clearly for RMI, so say hi to Franconi if he's around. But you don't. There's a risk of having a little bit of poaching between the good sites where people can have an intervention, the good experts that know the sector. So there's a potential for synergy. But it has to be a synergy that is coordinated, sorry, and that might also look at expanding the area of intervention, expanding the places of intervention and the areas, rather than operating from the areas that we know that have been defined, and perhaps opening new areas. Especially, I think, as we've seen with our work on the clusters, that you have all of these regions that produce. Difficult to make an estimation. Estimate would be between 30 to 60% of the production, depending on the years, is coming from these other areas, and we haven't yet seen, for a number of reasons, interventions there. So there may be a work to do synergies, but not always at the same place. So not everyone is tripping over each other's foot, and there's a then priorities are set.
Thank you. And just to confirm that from our experience and perspective, scalability has always been the number one challenge when it comes to enabling and fostering access to international markets for artisanal miners. So that's a very common challenge, and that's potentially something that we could structure a conversation around, because considering this is the common challenge to all ASM supply chains, there may be some value addition in approaching this from a comprehensive, exhaustive perspective. I don't know if there's another question.
Maybe if I can add on Nicolas' answer. So we are not the only ones, and we know we are not. We see in the three main approaches that we have at the Responsible Mica Initiative, working with the private sector, like miners and exporters, and working with mining communities, working with the state. We see that with exporters and with the state, there are huge synergies to find in between programs, because the number of actors you are dealing with is limited. And so and the approach is the same, and we are aligned with Terdesom. I already mentioned, and there is PACT as well, who is there. And we are aligned, and we have and we initiated exchange platforms with these other NGOs and concrete working groups on very specific issues to find an alignment on the way to target these issues. On community empowerment programs and on accompaniment of miners, it's a little bit different, and here I will totally be aligned with Nicolas. There is a huge there is a huge room for complementary and scaling up. So having our programs being implemented in different villages, right. I don't think maybe there is another question.
Yves. Yves is on. Go on, Yves.
Just wait, I need to enable him to speak. Now it's good. If you can unmute, and you should be able to speak. And there is also another question in the chat afterwards.
Regarding the use of technologies.
Okay, yeah.
I think we can take another question.
I can. Yeah, we can take the question on technology. So definitely, technology will solve everything. And just looking at what the Responsible Mica Initiative is doing, we, for example, have a blockchain-based traceability platform that enables us to follow and monitor not only the supply chains of our members, but as well the trend of the ESG performance of upstream actors, so miners and processing units. And so technology is helping us definitely in monitoring the progress made collectively towards the implementation of responsible workplace practices. It won't solve everything. We know that traceability is only a tool, but it's a very powerful one. I'm sorry, very powerful one. Yes. monitor true improvement in the supply chain. We leave it to maybe Louis to give us a broader overview.
I mean, technology is I mean, of course, technology has a role to play, but we're always a bit concerned that companies might believe that this is the silver bullet. And I think Nicolas made it very clear, and Olivier as well, you need boots on the ground. You need people to collect information. You need people to monitor the evolution of the situation. As always, I mean, most technological devices and solutions will, to some extent, help you understand where the mineral is coming from, but it won't tell you how it was produced, how it was traded. There's a number of risks you cannot spot by resorting to technological solutions. So they have a role to play. They have to be taken advantage of to some extent, but this has to be combined with very credible sort of information providers with contacts on the ground, and otherwise it's just an illusion that technology can fix everything. I don't know if Yves should come next or Nicolas. Yeah, Nicolas. Okay, Nicolas, is that a person?
Yeah, that was just to continue on your characterization here briefly. I mean, as you mentioned, as someone that is on the ground, really, we see the help that technology platforms can provide, but I think that the two elements that are sometimes forgotten in discussion is the age-old adage of trash in, trash out, as in how do you ensure that the information that gets into the system is the correct one, which is always very complex and difficult, particularly in the context where you have where levels of literacy are so low in the mining population. That adds a layer to the issue. And there's also the question of technology and accessibility. If you go to a mine site in Madagascar, some are not so remote. Some are very remote. It takes you 8 hours by truck to get there. There's barely any cell phone reception. Generally, there's none. And on this entire site, you may have 200 people, but only one person would have the simplest old dumb phone that is there, and that sometimes catches a tiny bit of connection. There, you would need to design something that takes into account low levels of literacy, low levels of technological literacy, very rugged conditions. Your closest power plug is going to be 300 kilometers away, and absolutely, no real-time data connection. So it has to store data and be able to transmit it afterwards. So there's a lot of challenges, and that doesn't even come close. That doesn't even take into account how do you ensure that the person actually puts the right information into the system at the time. So it is a tool, but it's not an end of itself. So that would be my takeaway there.
Just before moving into the conclusion part of the meeting, Yves Bertrand was flagging some concerns he has around the lack of policy in place from authorities, the challenges regarding the size of the area to monitor, and I understand as well the challenges that the mica sector itself is facing in comparison with the even bigger issues in colored stones and gold. And that was actually a question I had, but we can take it offline if you've seen competition already operating on the ground, and a competition to get miners into gold and colored gemstones as opposed to mica, which allegedly is probably more profitable, but that may be a wrong assumption. Just to respond to this, it might also be in the interest of the mica industry to remain slightly below the radar. I mean, that's not necessarily the case, but I would be inclined to think that it's not necessarily so bad to not be on the immediate radar of local authorities, if you see what I mean. So there may be pros and cons when considering those issues. I think we'll head down to the conclusion part. I think Carsten is supposed to be taking that. So Carsten, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So for me, this was a very interesting session on Madagascar. And while you all were talking, I thought, if someone would have expected that we are able to provide resolutions on all issues in Madagascar by today. I hope that was not the expectation. I think our mission here was to show that we have taken over tasks, that we have explored the situation, that we are developing tools which helps the entire supply chain to work on the most critical issues. And I think what we now learned is that we do not have a real connection between all different actors in the supply chain. And as soon as these actors in the supply chain can work on their individual issues and can exchange and share and voice also their requirements to each other, this will be a sustainable way of changing the entire supply chain. This is currently missing. So the manufacturers of the consumer goods which are using the mica do not have a contact to the actors on the ground, to the mining sites and the processors. And this is something which also is intended to be changed over time. So a lot of things will need to be done. We are quite happy that some of the most crucial measures are available to the RMI, also based on the experience in India. But you're all requested to help to get the mica supply chain more sustainable by closing gaps and exchanging the requirements and views, because this will be the real power of RMI. It's not about just paying money, it's about providing the tools and making the right connections, providing the right measures to the individual actors in the supply chain to improve and set up a new way of a responsible and sustainable mica supply chain there in Madagascar. Please keep in mind that the RMI organization on the ground has just developed within the last 1.5 years. So there is a long way to go and quite some work ahead of us. And I hope that we will have some further opportunities in upcoming conferences to show the progress in this regard and to show how we manage to tackle the issues and make progress. In that aspect, I also want to remind you of the annual report, which gets available by today. Farid has linked it to the chat of this meeting, so that's one of the opportunities to get it. You will certainly also find it as a link on the RMI homepage. And if there are any issues to get access to it, please reach out to the RMI team. They will be happy to assist you. And finally, I want to thank all of the speakers for their very good work they presented, the very clear presentations. Also to Louis for leading us through this meeting and to the RMI team for making this conference possible. So I wish all of us good luck for the upcoming endeavors, for all these measures which need to be implemented. And I wish everyone a happy reading of the annual RMI report. And with this, I hand it back to someone, or is this already the end of the meeting?
I can just take over to jump on your thanks, Carsten, to thanks also all the speakers, to thanks you, Louis, for accepting to moderate the annual conference, and you, Carsten, also for your constant support to the RMI. So yes, please do have a read to have a report, and if you have any questions or also ideas for next actions on collaboration, feel free to reach out to the RMI team. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.